Welcome back to the Knowledge Cast. This is a look into the world of knowledge management, information management, data management, and everything in between, brought to you by Enterprise Knowledge. Today's session is part of a series where we have the opportunity to speak with key voices in the semantic solutions space, bringing together industry thought leaders, experts, and practitioners to explore the latest advancements and best practices in the implementation of semantic layers. I am Lulit Tesfaye, partner and vice president of knowledge and data management at Enterprise Knowledge. I'll be your host for the Semantic Layer series on this podcast. And today I am joined by Ole Olesen-Bagneux. Ole is a chief evangelist at Actian, a cloud-native platform for metadata management and data discovery. Throughout his career, Ole has held numerous roles in architecture, engineering across various industries and government agencies. He also holds a PhD in information science and is a published author of the Enterprise Data Catalog and recently the Fundamentals of Metadata Management. Ole, welcome.
Thank you, Lulit. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. Well, first, congratulations on the recent publishing of your book. I think it came out a couple of months ago, maybe not even.
Yeah, I think that is fairly, I can't even remember either. I think a couple of months ago was pretty precise. Yes. Thank you.
Fair enough. We missed each other when we were in Copenhagen for the Semantic Layer Symposium, which is your home city, correct?
That is my home city, yes. And that was such a pity. I like you guys a lot. I actually listened to your podcast. I would have loved to join. I will do what I can to join you next year, wherever you host the conference in the world.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I would say likewise, I have been following your work, and I know we wanted to have you as one of our speakers on the symposium as well. So next year, certainly, but also made a point to connect afterwards. So thank you for making the time to have this conversation. So to me, I would say you are a rare breed with an interesting background, if I must say so. And the reason why I say that is because you don't see a lot of people with PhDs in information science, especially in the enterprise data and IT architecture space. So I wanted to start there and hear your journey. How did you end up here? What initially drew you to this space? And what are you working on today?
Yeah. So let me try to be brief on this because I guess everyone can talk at length about themselves, right? But let's try to focus on the interesting part for the listeners. Let me make a couple of short presentations. Like, for example, when I was a teenager, I had two hobbies. I was very much into computers and I liked literature. I like playing with words on floppy disks through MS-DOS and everything like deeper under that. And I like reading a lot. So fast forward to my 20s where I studied, wanted to become a professor at a university. I actually got tenured, but I got into industry. But I studied library information science because I like the intersection between technology and language a lot. And that's exactly what library information science is about. It's actually a bit more techy than a lot of people know. At least you can fine tune it like that discipline. And I just completely love that. Went into industry. My first, I kind of was promoted into management roles and director roles, and that was great. But I felt that I had distanced myself a little bit from technology, and that some of the strategic decisions were taken without me having a big enough say. So I kind of reflected on that, and I went deeper a little bit, if you want to, back to technology. So I began working as a strategic advisor, as an enterprise architect, focusing a lot on data. And so that's when I really, some 10 years ago now, right? And then I've been working deeper and deeper in the tech space. I was confronted with data catalogs at a certain point. And then I looked at the sales materials, I looked at the technologies at the time. And I said, I think there's room for improvement here. So I suggested a book to O'Reilly. I knew Pete-Hein Strenghold. I admire his work, Data Management at Scale, and his recent book, Building Medallion Architectures. We were working together. He was employed at Microsoft at the time. And I said, I have this book idea, and it was about data catalogs. And in the beginning, O'Reilly found it really weird because that's a small thing to write an entire book about. But when I presented this background that I had studied library information science, I saw this big clash in how these technologies were conceived and implemented, how you should actually work with something like cataloging, and that describing it from this particular angle would help companies. And then they accepted the book on that premise. And so then I became an O'Reilly author. And that just kind of catapulted me into like joining software companies, which was extremely fun and extremely hard. When you're in a startup business like that, it's just super hard, right? And so I went back into bigger industry a little bit, but Cinea, the company that I worked for, was acquired. I was out with my equity from that position. So I went back into industry, but then Actian bought Cinea, and they discovered that I wasn't part of the deal, and we began talking. And so here I am as the Chief Evangelist in Actian, telling the story of our data intelligence platform.
I do applaud you for that. I can tell you there's a lot of wealth of experience that you had to fit into a small period of time. And what really stands out to me is where you sit between kind of traversing between strategy and technology consistently back and forth. And I'm intrigued by the title Chief Evangelist. Can you say a little bit more about that? Like, what does a day in a life look like? What are you focused on?
As a European, I'm deeply skeptical of my own title. But the way I approach it is to talk very product-centric about what our ideas are, what our visions are. So I fly a lot, I talk at a lot of conferences, I write a lot, and I contribute to the roadmap of our technology, provide input and feedback. So there's certain elements of our technology that I am less interested in. What I am really interested in is its superpowers in everything metadata management. That's really something that gets me going. So I'm very close to the product. I don't think all evangelists would necessarily be that. I am. I communicate the product and the product architecture and the product vision in a very detailed way, obviously because I think it is a stellar technology, but that's also how I just approach evangelism. Since you asked the question, that's how I think about it. So I think I call it product-centric evangelism. That's how I do it. And I think certain people would perhaps approach it otherwise. But in terms of like me, I've always worked with a very deep level of detail, and I take pleasure in providing succinct, robust advice. And so in that case, I think I just need to be close to the product. Yeah, so that's how I approach it.
No, that's an interesting perspective, especially because, traditionally at least, metadata management is often, viewed as a technical task, not necessarily a product-centric way of thinking about it, which starts getting me into, if we take a step back, because of the fact that it is seen as this technical activity, if you will, I think we can agree that many business leaders question its value. Like, what's the ROI, at least upfront? So in your experience, how are those successful organizations articulating the ROI of investing in metadata management practices? Like, what are the tangible outcomes that you're seeing, especially these days?
Yeah, so I kind of think I should provide two answers to that question, because I agree with you that traditionally metadata management could be a tough sell, even though, so my first book, The Enterprise Data Catalog, is really shaped by that, right? I'm showing like the subtitle of my first book. Let me see if I can remember it. It's a long subtitle, and it's meant to be, so improve data discovery, ensure data governance, and enable innovation. And there's a causality in that, like, if we can improve data discovery through metadata management tools, through data catalog, data intelligence platforms, we can ensure data governance. And with that, we can enable innovation, because you need governed data to provide innovation. And so that's my first answer. That would be the argument reasons for doing catalogs in a company. That's why I had this subtitle. But I think that we are at a different point in time right now. I think it's changing rather dramatically and very fast because of AI. Like, I've been in metadata management in various roles all my life. So I completely agree that metadata has been difficult to sell, even though it's sorely needed. I think what is changing these months is that it's becoming a strategic decision. It's becoming a top priority within the C-suite to understand metadata, semantics, because we see, like, I think I knew that, I'm sure you also knew it, Lulit, that all these AI initiatives, they would take off with astronomical speed. Like, they would just get so much funding and they would just like take the entire strategic budget, and then they would like catastrophically fail, right? And I think the most recent study, was it from MIT, showed that like 95% of all AI projects fail. And the reason is, like, not the entire reason, of course, but a very, very important reason is the lack of context provided by metadata, by good metadata. So I think we're at a very fortunate point in time. In fact, I think my career has only been fueled by these problems that I already knew about, like as a young man 20 years ago. I could just like see how that now manifests itself in the struggles that many companies have with accelerating with AI. So I think there are two answers, basically. One answer is, yes, it's been difficult, but you can argue, even though it's difficult, you can explain exactly why you need metadata management. But that is accelerating now. So my second answer is, it will become easier and easier to explain why this is needed.
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who has invested into bringing the context and the knowledge side with the data side for the past decade, I would say this is music to my ears. And that's been something actually I wanted to ask you about too, is, we see this a lot, this big AI initiatives, and now the failure rates are coming in, the data is coming in. And I think it all goes back to the context, the knowledge. And this is something that actually stood out to me. I think it's in your second book where you introduced the concept of the metadata grid, and you've started talking about knowledge management as having the ability to unlock some of these issues that we're seeing on the technical side, the data side, the AI side. So tell me more about how do you describe these concepts, especially when it comes to how you define metadata grid with the semantic layer, or against the semantic layer. I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that.
Okay, so thank you for that. Yeah, I call as it's a grid of metadata. I call it the meta grid because metadata grid becomes so long, right? So just call it a meta grid. But the word is not super important. In fact, I try to not use the word too much, even though it's a little self-destructive. I don't know. I don't want the word to get hype, because then it will at some point no longer be a hype. And then I will be the guy that had a word that once was a hype. And I don't want to be that guy. And I think I should be talking more about it. But basically what it is, it's an idea of saying, I don't think companies, in fact, I think I can prove that companies do not have one semantic layer. They have many semantic layers. And these many semantic layers, they are stored across multiple types of technologies for various purposes. All these technologies, they leverage various purposes. I call these types of technologies metadata repositories. In this category, I list, for example, configuration management databases, integration repositories, asset management systems, endpoint management systems, data catalogs, information security management systems, knowledge management systems, quality management systems, records and information management systems. We have a lot of technologies in companies that contain a very well curated semantic layer, if you will. And I think that personally, I think we will never reach a point where one company has one semantic layer. But contrary to many of my engineering friends, like I am not an engineer by training, so I don't have this inherent desire to build something perfect. Like, I'm actually quite okay with living with these semantic layers, even though they may even oppose each other. But what I suggest with the metagrid is to think of these technologies in domains, like data mesh movement did, but just metadata domains, which are a little different. And you can cut them up in various ways. You can cut them up following, for example, a TOGAF topology of domains, with technology and business architecture and so forth, right? But you can also cut them up in a way that I am more used to thinking about domains, which is data, information, and knowledge. And then I would add IT to those domains. If we do that, we can group these technologies and we can create integration patterns between them when they need to exchange relevant types of metadata. Because too many projects begin with a whiteboard and a lack of knowledge. So what kind of data do we have? What kind of applications do we have? What kind of projects do we have? What is actually the business glossary of our company? What are the words we use for the things we try to describe? All of that, I claim, is already in the company. It resides somewhere in old systems, in deprioritized systems. Some of them they may be very well functioning, but they are discrete. They have no C-level attention whatsoever because they are just very discrete. One of them, for example, that I really like is typically an endpoint management system. Like when you go to a service desk and you begin a new job and you go to a service desk and you get a laptop and a phone, those systems, those endpoint management systems, they are so full of perfect semantics. Like they are really, really great, but they have no attention to these systems because they don't have I guess they're not shiny or interesting. And so the metagrid really is this architecture of domains that contains technologies wherein sits similar types of metadata defined for various purposes with various end users in mind. It could be financial controllers, it could be enterprise architects, it could be a quality department in a company. So that's really it. And that, in fact, that's how I discovered the Knowledge Cast podcast, because I was very thrilled also. I discovered your podcast writing my second book, and I thought, whoa, there are people out there that really understands this, the intersections of these domains and the technologies that sit in them. So
yeah, no, you may agree with this, but why I'm excited about this whole AI, let's call it, maybe I don't think it's hype anymore, but the biggest thing that's happening is this focus to back to basics, at least for us, like who's been in this space for a good amount of time. And I really like your perspective of how, the reality of organizations and having these multiple semantics concepts and metadata concepts by domain, by topic, or, by different ways of the architect, and being able to have those talk to each other. I can make the leap that in somewhat of a standardized way, right? Like that's what I think the differentiating factor is. But that said, I still think many organizations struggle balancing this technical complexity of where their content data, let's call it stuff, sits, right? Like actually we've been introducing this concept of like knowledge assets, regardless of it's structured, semi-structured, unstructured, people, it could be procedures, workflows, whatever it is that makes your content or your data within an organization. And you mentioned all these systems, the CMSs, the learning management systems, the content knowledge management systems, fit for purpose applications that are meant to store and lock down information, as opposed to making it easier to connect, or at least have not been built with that in mind.
KnowledgeCast is brought to you by Enterprise Knowledge, the world's largest dedicated knowledge management consultancy. From training to benchmarks, strategy, design, prototyping, and all the way to enterprise-level implementations, Enterprise Knowledge wants to be your services partner, spanning the fields of knowledge management, knowledge graphs, data, learning, advanced content management, and enterprise artificial intelligence. Contact us at info@enterprise-knowledge.com to discuss how we can support you.
So like where this takes me, and this is a question we always, how are people navigating this complexity of legacy technology, as well as the stuff that they have, the diversity and the variety of it, and where you are seeing the metadata and semantic layers add value? Especially like if an example comes to mind that you're recently working on, I think it would be very valuable to hear your experience.
Yeah, so in multiple ways. But I think first and foremost, implementing new technologies often happens in a vacuum. People are very isolated when they implement new technologies. They set up all kind of boards and steering committees and try to not be isolated. But in general, I see Conway's law in metadata and semantics. Like you implement a specific type of technology, and typically the sociology of that is that you think you're getting it right, and past attempts have failed, but this time we will make it. So that may sound a little pessimistic. I'm actually not that pessimistic, but I do think that ignoring this very typical mechanics also give you some blind spots, because people tend to not look in old technologies and study what is already, and that creates a lot of confusion. It creates what I call a monolithic worldview, a single view of the world. It's a term that I borrowed from Team Topologies, this great book on how modern software companies or software teams, engineering teams should work together. So in this case, I think we have a single view of the world situation where everything is perfectly mapped in a system that is completely isolated from a lot of other teams that could benefit from it. And so that, I think, is the primary reason. Buying new technology, making it work, would accelerate if you understand the context where it sits better. Then I also think you can increase the performance across these various technologies. My purpose is not to a metagrid may sound awfully academic, right? But it's really not. It's about making existing technologies work better, right? Because typically technologies tend to only focus on the specific processes that they carry out. So, for example, if you're in a CMDB world, you handle the present and the immediate past. That's what you do. So everything that is outside of that bubble is kind of a gray zone for you. You don't know the deep past of your company, even though it would be highly beneficial for you to have that link in the CMDB. You don't necessarily know the strategic future state of the IT landscape either, or data landscape either of your company, even though that would also be very beneficial for you, simply because you would then be able to auto-populate your CMDB instead of chasing that manually. So this is just one example, but you could also imagine like an asset management system where you get deeper and better understanding of the financial implications of your IT landscape. These are like awfully mundane things, but it's the reality in companies. Like people are trying to chase that complete picture of the IT landscape, and they do it in isolation. They don't talk to each other in the vast majority of cases. So this metagrid architecture, I've been getting very, very positive feedback from all kinds of verticals: pharmaceutical companies, financial services companies, big manufacturing companies, construction companies. A lot of people can see that this is the reality. So I take a bit of pride in that, I have to say.
It's interesting how you're borrowing from the field of sociology. I like how you put it, it's ignoring your blind spots. And sometimes you don't even know you have blind spots, right? Like the unknown unknowns is a whole other category of that. You said something as you're talking about this concept of the monolithic. We were talking about with my previous guest, Dan Hansen from Shell, about how the pendulum is swinging when it comes to like the vendor space around, modular composable architecture to the monoliths. And I think we are seeing this. A very tangible example I would give you, because you wrote the book and the enterprise data catalog, is around the consolidation, the mergers and acquisitions that are happening in that space. In fact, this is leading to the debate about, the future of data catalog is a dead conversation, right? So what's your take on where we're going with this? Specifically, because you are working on a product, how are you evolving to this change?
Oh, well, we are in that change, right? I was with a small startup that was a standalone tool that then got bought by a bigger technology. And now we're expanding it to become a complete data intelligence platform with observability, with identity and access management features, like a big platform to perform data governance and data management, right? And to accelerate AI. We deeply believe in our, call it a federated knowledge graph because of its architecture and the potential it has to accelerate AI projects. So I think I'm in that movement. I never particularly liked the word data catalog, so I don't mind it going away. I do not believe that the current consolidation we see, particularly in the data management domain, is something that will create a semantic unity in a company, because we still see that data catalogs are just, maybe they will be evolving into larger platforms with more capabilities, which is a very normal pattern for software evolution. But we will still have competing technologies. We will still have knowledge management systems, still have records and information management systems, and they will all have a role to play. They should have a role to play. My thesis is that what they do shapes how they are structured. Meta models are never neutral. They try to obtain something and they are shaped by that. So for data catalogs, this would be shaped by your strategic initiatives. It would mirror your company, obviously, but it would be shaped by your strategic initiatives with data that would play a role in how you shape the meta model. For CMDBs that we were talking about, the universe of IT service management has to be depicted in the meta model for the CMDB to work. Not it will not work. So I think that will never go away. It may become discrete because of agents, something we never see, but even agents will be shaped by the capabilities that they try to resolve.
It sounds to me like in your answer, I'm picking out a few things that we just have been hearing over and over again are unaddressed problems, or problems that have been addressed in different pockets, but not like in a unified way, with the challenges in data management and data governance space, which is, you talked about the access and identity management, which is that security aspect, which is usually is managed by IT or somewhere. And then there is the connectivity, the meta grid that you're talking about. I hear that the ability to connect the shift from application to the data, or the meta about the data itself, is a big focus of that. And then the third piece you're talking about is observability. And I hear in that, and this is where I want to validate with you, understanding what's going on. For organizations, there's some sort of monitoring and evaluation as a part of this. I'm curious if you're more focusing on observability from a data quality standpoint versus also explainability of how did you reach this decision. There's been a little bit of confusion around this space, as you know, there's a lot of noise as well. So like, what would be your guidance? And actually, this starts getting into, for organizations that have been on this journey or are beginning this journey of looking into metadata or semantic layers as a solution to help them with, so be it AI use cases or whatnot, what would you say should be a must-have in their tech stack in like key decisions, like a starting place? Because I think that's where the challenge is right now for people who are on the journey or starting this journey.
Oh yeah, I sense multiple questions in that question. Let me start with what you absolutely need, right? For me, it is extremely important that if you want to succeed with AI, you need an ontology strategy. You need a semantic strategy, if you will. That is absolutely key. And you need that not only as something that is a nice PowerPoint in a strategy deck, you need a technically materialized ontology, and you need more of those actually. You need one for each domain. You need to be able to train agents down to very, very specific contexts, and that requires, however you want to create that, graphs that are capable of depicting domains very, very precisely. That is the absolutely most important thing if you want to succeed with AI, and it's unparalleled. There is nothing else that is more important than that. It's just the most important thing. And I think that was shown very early with the knowledge graph, large language model pattern, how knowledge graphs can in all kinds of ways increase precision, large language model powered agents, if you will. But it goes in many directions and it serves multiple purposes. You can also point at how large language models can enhance knowledge graphs, and you can play with that back and forth. One of my brilliant colleagues, Ole Olesen-Bagneux, working out of the Paris office in Actian, we have written a series of articles on that on Substack. So that is the absolutely most important feature if you want to push forward with an AI strategy.
Well, this goes back to how I started, which is hearing the O word, ontology, being said out loud is really rare and something that's becoming more frequent in this space. And I know we've shared this journey from a while back, but really something that's been very exciting to see emerging, especially, because that's been reserved primarily for library science, the content side, but getting now into the AI engineering and the data side. And I think I see this world coming together of, your background as you started with computer and linguistics, like it is ontologies and knowledge graphs being the core components of making knowledge computable, if you will. I think we have that's like the biggest thing that's standing out to me as you're walking through. So I can nerd out on the topic of ontology for some time, but I know we're nearing the end of our time. So I wanted to take this opportunity, and I would be remiss not to ask. We've covered a bit of ground, but is there something that's big that you are following right now that we didn't get into or we didn't talk about? What's top of mind these days? What's next for you?
Yes. So very concretely, I'm traveling a lot. So that would be like, from a practical point of view, that would be next. A lot of airports, a lot of cities. But more strategically, I'd say that I think we are at a point in time where we are witnessing something that I think is quite fantastic to see in the tech space, which is that metadata is no longer something that we only use to point at sources. Like that's the traditional role of metadata. It's to say this book exists in this bookshop or that library or this online bookshop or whatever, right? That used to be the role of metadata. Now metadata is becoming a source in itself. So it's actually just amplifying what I just said about ontologies for AI. But what is happening at a higher level, what we're seeing is that metadata is no longer a source about sources. Metadata is becoming a source in itself through ontologies for AI, which is really interesting because we don't know what that will bring in an enterprise technology context. We can only see that it is extremely powerful at this point in time. And so I find that exciting. I look forward to exploring what that will mean for how we innovate with AI. That metadata is becoming a source in itself.
Yeah. Is there an example or a use case that comes to mind when you say that? I hear that and I think, it has become active, it has become alive or actionable to a certain point, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I wanted to hear if there's like examples of use cases that are emerging that are a telltale sign of that.
I think this will be the key parameter for all kinds of agentic architectures. So more than delivering on one specific task or capability, I'd say that if we are to succeed with agentic architectures, whatever they will do, however dense they will be, however we will materialize them, I think that metadata will become the key for that, not data, because data is too big and too, messy. But finely structured metadata sets will be absolutely key for everything agentic. So more than what it will actually mean, it's just I think that is the key for what will come.
Yeah, and I think it really addresses the biggest IT tech debt, if you will, or like migrations and physical movement of data and being able to kind of shift from that to like the metadata itself as your core entity. So that's an interesting perspective. And I would love to hear more about that. I do want to pause and say, thank you for taking the time for this wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. And to our listeners, thanks again for joining us in this episode of the Semantic Layer series on KnowledgeCast. To learn more, visit our website at enterprise-knowledge.com. Until next time, thank you all.